Hello, everyone. My name is Christian Roberts. I'm the Director of Education at the Dallas Opera. I'm here with my fantastic co-host.
Quo Johnson, Education and Company Culture Manager for the Dallas Opera.
And we are back for another episode of Taking the Stage with Kristian
and Quo.
So, Quo, let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. First of all, I always seem to forget this, and you never want to forget to thank people for tuning in. Thank everyone for tuning in. Thank you, TDO Network, for continuing to have us on this platform. And we also, the people that have been commenting and talking to us and sending private messages, thank you so much for that. That is we're very much grateful for that, and for the feedback. Keep it coming.
Keep it coming.
Yes. That's it. That snaps. Keep it coming. So what we want to do is, in this particular episode, we've had some guests over the past few weeks, but what we wanted to do was sort of give a recap of what the purpose of this show is, why we decided to do it, and also talk about what's coming up. So, Quo, let's talk about a little bit about what we've done so far.
Okay. Thus far, if you have not seen the episodes, please go back and watch them. We've talked about the purpose of this show, which is to create meaningful conversations about some of the topics that we face or some of the experiences that we have in the arts, in life, in education, and what that means being artists and being arts administrators. We set a foundation for this show. We're taking the stage with Kristian and Quo, and that we will continue to look at things through a lens of equity. We'll look at it through inclusion. We'll look at it through true diversity and what that means. We'll also look at these topics. We'll look at these issues. We'll look at all of the things that we'll talk about in a way that reduces harm. Right? We never want to cause more harm, but more than anything else, in a way that creates healing and in a way that allows all of us to come together so that we can create collective solutions, so that we can come up with solutions together, so that we can have accountability, so that we can have grace, so that we can seek peace in what we're doing.
Absolutely. And I think so far, we tried to bring that to what we've been doing. And our guest speakers so far have also done that. I have personally had a good time with a lot of the people that we've had on. They've been speaking some real truth and talking about ways that we can really, really try to implement some of these things. Morris Robinson, I thought, was fantastic in talking about all the different things and ways that he approaches working in moving within the community. And so it has been very, very insightful. I mean, so I've enjoyed myself so far. I mean, even to get to talk to local educators, there's a lot of insight to be gained there. We will have them back. I think there's a lot we can learn just by looking at our school systems, and I might be a little biased since I am the director of education, but it's education and it's important. And the same thing we talk about as far as equity, diversity, and inclusion, you won't find it, in a place more evident than in education. You find it in every level of education. So I think it's very important that we set the stage that way, Quo. And I appreciate you being, the showrunner and the writer, and making sure that we looked at it through that way, and we looked at all of these subjects through this particular lens. I think it's vitally important given the current situation that we're in, but it was vitally important long before that, and It will be vitally important after this.
Right.
And if you don't know what situation that I'm talking about, obviously it's COVID-19.
In that, we wanted to kind of make sure, even as we had David as our first guest, right? We wanted to have real conversations, like we are talking about it. We're not going to skate around the issue. We are not going to pretend there is not an issue. We are not going to find other ways to call the issue other than what it is, which is an issue. And so in doing that, we're wanting to make sure we seek truth, but we want to do so in a way that allows all of us, again, to kind of have accountability, and then for all of us to be able to create steps so that we can create change. Because us ignoring it, or us pretending like it doesn't exist, or us only talking about it within certain circles, will not allow us to be able to move forward. And so that's what we're wanting to do.
Well, absolutely. And I think the other thing that's important about that is not only with not talking about it within certain circles, but also making sure that we talk about it in a way where everybody understands that you have a part to play in this.
Yes.
There is something that you can do.
Right.
because I know for a lot of people, as I said, it can seem very daunting, or you can say, well, it's just been going on for so long. How on earth did we stop it? But the minute you take on that kind of attitude, you're already defeated.
Right.
And Quo, what do you always say? We quote one of your favorite movies.
Oh, it's one of my favorite movies. Never give up, never surrender. Galaxy Quest. Go watch it.
Yes. So I think that doesn't mean we don't retreat and take a step back and reevaluate some things, but we won't ever surrender or give it up. We're coming back.
We'll be back.
We'll be back. So one of the things that we also want to talk about is where we're going moving forward, because we're about to march into some territory that has been going along the same lines of this, but it's also looking at things in sort of historical context and how they affect us today. So one of the things that people get really a little funny around, and what we hope to define for you today, because it starts, sort of, I see people sort of freaking out sometimes when we start talking about the words dismantling. When we say dismantling and replacing, and all of a sudden it's like dismantling and replacing what? Well, basically the systems that don't really serve us. And by us, I mean the whole of us. So, Quo, can we talk about this a little bit as it pertains to EDI and as it pertains to looking at history and where we are today?
Right. So in looking at this topic kind of for this episode, we wanted to do a recap again, but then kind of, as Kristian said, say where we're going. In order for us to do that, we want to, again, set kind of another layer to that foundation of what we're wanting to achieve. So when we say dismantling, Kristian, you said the systems that do not serve us, also dismantling the fallacy, right? We're dismantling the fallacy, we're dismantling the lies, we're dismantling the belief that there are differences according to things that are already kind of genetic, right? We're dismantling systems that deal with race. We're dismantling systems that deal with sex, that deal with gender. We're dismantling systems that do not serve us in the best way. We're dismantling systems that prevent inclusion and true inclusion. And so in doing this, it's important that we pay attention to why things are the way they are. We've inherited so many things that are kind of out of our control, quotation marks, or I didn't do that, or I didn't have these things, or this is just what my parents did for me. These different types of approaches, which is true. They're all true. But it is also a matter of looking at the entire truth. How did we get to where we are now? What systems were in place, what systems are still in place for us to continue in these things so that when we look down the line generations from now, it's still the same. That's what we're wanting to prevent. We're wanting to make sure that we look at kind of cultural norms, things that we just accept to be normal, expectations that we have for others that we don't have for ourselves, right? Pain that takes place within this nation that hits one community more than another. And so in wanting to help others and in wanting to serve others, acknowledging that we have a national issue, we have an entire issue that affects everybody, whether we realize it or not. And wanting to go through the steps of looking at that, seeking truth, and then looking at ways to change those things. So I'm excited for all the guests that we'll have coming up, because they'll also, in their own way, kind of be talking about different ways to, one, talk about it, because that's where it starts, to acknowledge truth. Again, I've said before, we're not making it up. People are not making it up. And we have to acknowledge the differences that come with having an advantage, and how those advantages have led to the fallacy that we're in, that some are just superior to others, some are just better than others, some just have it better than others. Because no, how'd you get it?
Well, and it's also, we have to realize and understand, and as a historian of sorts myself, with my background in music history, but I look at music history as history, because we know that art reflects life, and we've seen that. And even to hear you say, looking at how we got here. Right. Because it's not just by accident. Right. There are people who didn't wake up today and say, I think I'll just be poor. It's just, there have been systems that have been built that have caused some of this stuff. Right. And so I want to be very clear on that point, that like you said, cultural norms and expectations, things that we assign to people,
Right.
and those implicit bias and not so implicit biases
Right.
that people have. So we have to be very careful with those things, and we need to look at how it affects education, how it affects our society, how it
Right.
affects our workforce, and
Right.
how it affects the arts,
Right.
because we are on an artistic platform. And we need to be very clear that if it's happening in society, it's happening in the arts.
It's gonna happen in the arts. The arts, like you say so often, they don't happen in a vacuum. The arts do
No.
not occur in the vacuum. And so as we seek to find these solutions in the arts, we have to know that the arts are not exempt from the other systems that we face in our society. So if we're wanting to do that, then it's time for the artistic fields to take ownership of what the arts can do to help solve these problems. Otherwise, as we continue to say, oh, we want this type of audience, or we want to make sure that everybody loves whatever type of art form it is, people don't have time to try to love your art form if they're worried about staying alive.
Well, or
Especially if
eating.
the art form has never shown, right, any interest in them. Why?
Absolutely.
Where does it come from? Why would we? No.
Absolutely. So you have to understand that, and like I said, you said it comes from somewhere,
It comes from somewhere.
and there's a root to it. And so some of the territory that we are going to be going into is might be deemed controversial, but we welcome that, because the nature in which we are approaching this, again, is out of grace and respect and truth, and with the idea that yes, there might a dismantling might need to take place, but a dismantling without replacement is irresponsible.
Is irresponsible.
So understand that when we talk about dismantling, we're also talking about replacing it with something better, doing something better.
And we're talking about replacing it together.
Absolutely.
Right.
So I said everybody has a role to play in this. So I just want to be clear on that point. So let's talk about replacing for a little bit, because when you talk about dismantling systems that have been in place for a long time, you know, and there are some people who are aware of it. There are some people who are unaware of it.
Right.
They don't even realize that it's going on. And there's a shock and an awe sometimes, or a disbelief when we bring these kinds of things up. And I'm sure that that will happen over the course of the next shows when we start diving deeper into some of this stuff. Let's talk about replacing. You know, sort of what does that look like? And we don't have to give it all now. That's going to come later on in show. But what kind of just give us a preview. Let's not give it all to the people right now.
Okay. So in order for us to, again, begin to dismantle the system, we have to go and we have to accept truth, right? We've talked about, you know, how we all have our own truth, and then there is the truth, which is kind of a combination of all of our truths. But we want the truth, your truth as well, but the truth. And how that folds into the truth. And so in looking at this, we want to make sure that we look at the narratives that we've accepted, or the narratives that we've been given, right? Just simply what we learn in school, who we do not learn about in school, right? What is an elective in school for us to learn? What is an elective for us to deem important? What is an elective or extra or not given priority in what we honor, in the cultures that we honor? That's just an example. So the narratives that we have shape so much of how we see the world. Our experiences shape so much of how we see the world. And so as we go about replacing the systems, or replacing these systems, we want to ensure that we are including others who have truth to add. Well, we are including the experiences of others. I'm always about inclusion, right? And so we want to make sure that we're also including the history, the full history from every perspective. Give us the facts. We're looking at facts, right? Not so much as how things have been shaped to tell a story a certain way, to vilify others. We're talking about the truth. And once we kind of get to that place, as we work on replacing this, we want to make sure we're replacing this system with one that is self-sustaining in a way that serves everyone.
Absolutely.
to the fullest amount possible, right? You cannot be everything for everyone. And of course, I always want to make sure that I'm keeping kind of through the arts. But as that extends into education, as that extends into society, we want to make sure that we're reducing harm and that, we understand that there were people who were suffering before, there are people who are suffering now, and we want to minimize the number of people who will be suffering after whatever, once we get to whatever that new normal is, or even now as we work to address these issues. Like you said, COVID has brought out a lot of things that were already there, right? And then it's added on to some of the issues that are already there, and then it's added issues as well. And there's no reason why we should be in a nation where kids don't have what they need to feel
Absolutely.
safe, to have an education. Like, that makes no sense. And so we have to acknowledge that all of that is coming out of a system that was protected and shaped within a narrative that was a lie.
Absolutely.
And so as we go about replacing those things, of course, we're always talking about grace, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take us looking at each other and understanding that we're all kind of approaching this from different perspectives, to respect those perspectives, but to make sure that we're still centering around truth and we're still centering around the desire to heal. Because once we work toward a desire to heal, we'll be able to move together, and we'll be able to kind of give and take in what we understand, and give and take in the roles that we play and what's necessary for this work.
Absolutely. And like I said, this is something that permeates every facet of our society.
Yep.
And I believe lately, and particularly with our two guests last week, with Christian Haley and Devlin DeCutler, with two educators in our local district here in DISD, we heard some of the things that the district was doing, and some of the strides they were trying to make in providing, equitable access to things like internet and internet connected devices and all this kind of stuff. And those are steps that need to be taken across the board. Like you said, to provide children an education. And in a country that's supposed to be one of the wealthiest ones, if not the wealthiest ones, we sure like to pretend we broke. And I use we very loosely, because we're not broke. It's where we choose to prioritize and put things. And if we're not putting it in education, if we're not putting it into truth, if we're not putting it into doing real work to provide real equitable conditions and real fair shots for everybody, then of course it looks like we're broke.
Right.
And that's part of the lie.
That's part of the lie. And even in that, right, the idea of scarcity, right?
Yes.
And in that, kind of being mindful that when we say equity, this should not be considered as handouts.
No.
They should not be considered as coddling, right? We're making sure that things are fair, because they have been unfair for a very long time. And if you want to see it as a handout, then see it as a delayed handout, because they gave out handouts to a lot of people a long time ago, and they've still been giving out handouts since the founding of this nation. So we want to
Deal.
I'm sorry. Be mindful of what that means. And as we go forward, and as we want to create a space where we don't have to subscribe to hatred, and we don't have to subscribe to false barriers, and we don't have to subscribe to audiences or arts or education or environments where everyone who wants to help and who wants to participate and who wants to contribute is not welcomed, right? We don't have to subscribe to those type of environments. That we can create our own environments that include people who want to help, include people who want to participate. Once we get there, we'll be able to truly replace the systems that we are facing now. And in that, it's understanding that it's not going to be easy, right? It's not going to be quick. But that work is necessary. And so that's part of what we're wanting, to bring to light with this show. I want to bring that to light, that there's an issue, there are many issues, we're going to do something about it, and we're going to do something about it together. And then realizing that in doing that, it's a learning process and it takes time. But as long as we center truth and as long as we center healing, we'll get there.
Absolutely. And, there are people and organizations who specialize in doing this kind of work and who can advise on how to proceed with this and how to on best practices, current practices. We talk with them all the time. I know you definitely do in your particular realm. But we've also talked to some of them through the lens of our work in education as well, because um, it goes across the board, and we need to be looking at it from every possible angle that we can to make sure that we are having, I don't want to say not necessarily the widest impact, but the deepest impact we can possibly have in this work. Because casting the net wide doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the deep impact that you need. So I think that some of the things that we have coming up, I think our audience is definitely going to be in for a ride. Be prepared for truth. Be prepared for collective solutions. Be prepared for creative solutions. Be prepared for, again, there are still positive things that come out of this. And while it may seem daunting, it is very much needed. And if we can do it during a time such as this, when there is an invisible thing that we have to rely on our frontline workers to take care of for us. Right. But if we can continue to have these conversations in a time such as this, and work towards solutions in a time such as this, imagine what would happen afterwards if we've already done some of the work, because people were doing the work again before COVID. We'll continue to do it during COVID, as COVID is revealing a lot of things to a lot of people, and we will continue to do it afterwards. I think that's the gist of it right there. And again, Quo, your positive notes. We always end on positive notes. I know I've given some. What about you?
Always with the positive notes, not false positivity or toxic positivity, as we spoke about, I think in the first or second episode. Like true positive notes, in that, look around, right? The evidence is in your face. It's in all of our face. But so are the solutions, right? Those same situations where we see that there are disparities, we see that there are unfair consequences to some of the same situations. We see how people are not given the proper chance, regardless of where they're from, regardless of what they look like, not given the proper chance to participate in things. Especially, again, we're looking at the arts, we're looking at education. That solution comes from you doing something, right? And it comes from us having conversations. It comes from us working together. It comes from us working with organizations who are doing this work. The positive note that I want to leave most of all is that it will get done. It's just a matter of what role are you going to play as we kind of work to change this world, right?
Absolutely.
As we work to change how we create art, how we share art, how we have co-ownership of art, the stories that we tell, the way we tell those stories. So it's a matter of what role will you play, and ensure that that role is a meaningful one.
That's great. I think that's great, and with that, folks, I think that is going to cover where we're headed. So we are grateful that you tuned in. We're grateful that, again, we're grateful to TDO and TDO Network for providing us with this platform so we can talk about these things. We appreciate your comments. We appreciate your feedback. Please continue to watch. If you get uncomfortable, please try to lean into the discomfort and ask yourself why you're uncomfortable. But we want you to realize that we're doing this, again, in truth, with grace, with respect. That's the biggest thing.
Even with that, if there is going to be discomfort, be honest about it. Share it.
Absolutely.
Share it. It's okay. We're here to talk. We are here to have conversations, right? We're here to have meaningful conversations together so we can have collective solutions. Honor the fact that you're uncomfortable. And then honor the fact that you're probably not the only person who's uncomfortable. And then open that up, open the space so that we can have dialogue, so that we can have conversations around it. And I think we'll get where we need to go.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, again. And we will see you again for another episode next week. Bye.
Goodbye.